Hi everyone, welcome. Thank you for joining us for our seed starting workshop with Allegheny Mountain Institute. We are an educational nonprofit working to cultivate healthy communities through food and education. We strive to meet our mission through a three-pronged approach, which includes an 18-month tuition-free food and food system fellowship, institutional support for schools and hospitals through integrating farming, nutritious food, and related education, and regional networking to build a food system that nourishes our bodies, our environment, and our economy. I'm Sarah Spinner. I'm a community fellow, and I'll be hosting this workshop. I'd like to remind you that it is being recorded and will be posted to our YouTube channel. So if you don't want to be recorded, you can just go ahead and turn off your video. Also, everyone is currently on mute, so if you have any questions, please utilize the chat box. Also, at the end, we'll have plenty of time for questions. Again, you can just put those in the chat. And also, I pre-recorded most of this information. I wanted to utilize a demonstration, and I was in the greenhouse, and we don't have Wi-Fi out there, so I recorded it, so I'll just be playing that for you guys, and then we'll run through some questions at the end.
So why should we even start seeds indoors? Well, main reason is it really gets a jump start on your harvest and your growing, so that way with these shorter seasons you can get everything done in time, especially with, for example, tomatoes. They are more of a tropical plant, so they really require long days, long warm days, and a very long season, which we don't have here. So starting them inside will just give them time to mature for when they're ready to go outside, and we'll actually fruit in time, and we'll get tomatoes in the summer. Also, especially at a home grow scale, it's gonna be cheaper than buying starts. Especially, or if you're just trying to upscale, you have way more variety to choose from. You can look at your seed catalogs, there's a lot of cool stuff out there, and it's a lot of fun to just plant your own seeds and watch them grow from seed to seedling to outdoors and then eating it. I think getting the full experience is also more fun, and it's more fun to pick out fun varieties. And certain plants do better planted indoors versus direct sowing outdoors. So, like I said, tomatoes are one of them. Also, eggplant, peppers, some brassicas, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, and lettuces also do well started indoors. Some of the things that do best starting direct sowing outdoors would be cucumbers and melons, squashes, and root vegetables. And this is just because they don't want their roots messed with once they've kind of formed. But this year we are going to be doing some seed starting indoors with our root vegetables, and that's mainly just because we are really high production here, so we really need that head start. We have a lot of successions planned for all of our rows, so just to make sure we have time for everything, that's why we're doing it. So if you don't have high production, there's no need to do it. Just go along with whatever your goals for the year are. And planning is really important. You have to have a plan set up for knowing when to start them indoors, when to transplant them, and keeping an eye on that. But it's contingent on weather, but it is good to have a plan going just to start off with. So helpful to create a schedule, and you can do this by looking at your seed packet or online. It will often say, especially with these tomatoes, it even says like it's recommended as a transplant, and it says to start it 5 to 6 weeks before they're going to be put outside, which is after the last frost date. And there's also a lot of great information on these seed packets, which you'll want to refer to, like what the soil temperature should be, what the air temperature should be, how deep to plant it. So good source of information there. And these plans and your schedule will look different depending on the climate you're in. So check your hardiness zones and your frost dates. Especially important in Virginia, the weather's crazy, so kind of closer to the mountains where we are will be different than the Piedmont or the coast. So really important to look at that, and the schedule could look different if you're going to be transplanting into a high tunnel or under row cover, and you can probably put them out sooner then because they're more protected from the elements and just the temperature's more controlled in there and it's going to be warmer. So let's talk about the materials you need. So you need a container, obviously. Really important for all your containers to have drainage holes, and this can be, this is a 72 cell flat, or you can just have regular flats. You can have small little pots. You can also use something from home, like a yogurt container. Again, if you're doing stuff from home, just make sure you poke some holes in the bottom for that drainage. Next, soil. This is really important. You want to use a soil mix that is actually for growing seeds and starting seeds, not just like a regular potting mix or even soil from outside. What we use is this McEnroe Organic Light growing mix with perlite. There's a lot of good ones out there, so you know, do your research, see which one works best for you. You can also mix your own. A really common one is super easy, just 3 ingredients, is vermiculite, peat moss, and perlite, and it just provides, again, the right aeration, the right water retention, the right drainage, and the right nutrients your seed will need to germinate and grow. And determining like the size you're gonna need is not super important, but if you're using like smaller seeds, you can do something smaller depending on how long they're gonna be staying indoors for before transplanting them out. So just knowing how much room they're gonna need. With something like tomatoes, they're gonna be in the greenhouse probably a little longer, or in your home a little longer. So if I'm planting in here, I'll probably have to up pot it once into a bigger plant, a bigger pot, so the plant has more room to grow before going outside, because you don't want it to get root bound. You want to keep them healthy and really keep growing, so that way when you're going outside, they're ready to just take off running. So then with planting the seeds, again, the depth can be found. It's preferred depth on seed packets. A good rule of thumb that we do here is 1.5 size of the seed. That's how deep you want to put it. And so I'm going to show you an example with peas. Again, I mentioned that it's not a super common one to start indoors, and does fine direct seeded outside, but high production here, so we want to get them started. And this is how they look just after a week or so. I mean, they look great. They're really cute. They even have little tendrils already, so those will be ready to go outside and start giving us some peas. So what this will look like, it's really easy to tell with these bigger peas. Just lightly push them in. Again, shoot for 1.5 its size and depth. And you might need to get some more soil, but you need to cover them up and water them. They need to stay moist. The worst thing that can happen is that they get too dry or too cold. And then with tomatoes, a much smaller seed. I'm going to show got a handful of them here. I'm just going to take one, put it in here. And again, this one's pretty small, so you don't need to get it too deep in there. Cover it up and don't forget to water it. So once they're all planted, what conditions do they need to really thrive and grow and be ready for the outside? So we already talked about the soil, temperature, light, and water. All very important elements to keep up with. Temperature, you want to keep when they're germinating, so before they sprouted, you want to keep it at like 68 to 85 degrees. That's just a range. It can be more specific for certain plants, certain varieties, so take note of that. And also, once it's already sprouted, the soil temperature can be cooler, about roughly 10 degrees cooler, and it'll still be fine. So this brings us to the air temperature. We regulate our greenhouse with heat, and we also have fans and everything. So it's good to have a thermometer nearby, especially if you are doing this in your home. You want to have them near where you're actually doing this, like by your sunny windowsill, so that way you know what the temperature is right where you're growing them. So right now it is 64 degrees in here. Probably could be warmer. But it is a very gloomy day here today. So talking about heating at home, this can be, like I said, that sunny windowsill, or you can get heat mats. You can use compost, which is a nice natural heating element, or you can use grow lights, which brings us to light. Your plant, once they've sprouted, they're gonna want 8 to 10 hours of light a day. Again, at home, the sun, by your sunny window, whatever window probably gets the most sun, and grow lights can also work for this. And now this brings us to sending it off to Dylan. He is another community fellow, and he's going to talk about a germination chamber and how that could be useful and when that can be useful.
So this is our germination chamber. What a germination chamber is a structure that provides heat and humidity to help germinate your seeds at a faster rate and an even rate. So everything in the flat, we hope that it will germinate at the same time and also faster than if they were just out in the greenhouse. How it works is we have a water pan down here filled with water, and it has a hot water heater that's kind of like what you would have at your hot water heater in your home. And that's connected to this thermostat, which is temperature controlled. So as the germ chamber gets too cool, the water pan kicks on, fills up the chamber with hot mist, and keeps it hot and humid in there. The way we use it, we fill up our trays with our seeds, we pop them in here, we choose the right temperature based on the kind of category here, like brassicas, we germinate at 78 degrees, and lettuce and peas and spinach, we do 68 degrees. We choose the right temperature, and we set them in here, and then we check on them every day for a few days. Usually most things start within a few days, maybe a week or so for some of these other veggies. And as soon as you start seeing germination, you want to pull them out. As soon as the surface of the soil starts cracking, you have to pull them out of the germ chamber, put them in your greenhouse or wherever else the starts are going to grow, because once there's an actual plant servicing, it needs light to keep growing. Without the light, they'll die. It's okay to leave them in if there's only a little bit of germination starting, like if only 1 or 2 seeds have started, you might want to just let it go a little longer to sacrifice those to get the rest of the flat germinated. But yeah, take them out once that happens. And then you're good to go. Your seeds are on their way to greatness.
So now you have to maintain them. So mostly watering. Again, really want to keep them moist. It can be really detrimental to them if they get too dry. And also maintaining the temperature, also very important. So with watering them, you probably want to water them once or twice a day, really keep up with it. Also note the temperature of your water, especially if you're like how we have in this greenhouse, we have a hose that sits outside. We have to really make sure the water isn't cold from the night before, because using cold water can be pretty detrimental to them. This could be probably easier to do in the home. If you're starting your seeds inside your house, you can just feel the tap water or whatever water you're using. And then for monitoring the temperature, like I said, keep a thermometer nearby from where your plants actually are, or even using like a thermometer probe for the soil temperature. And then, so let's say they're ready to go outside now. So for transplanting, refer back to that schedule you made or that plan you kind of have in your head of what time they should be going outside. This is super contingent on the weather, but it still is good to refer back to that plan. And so this could look different for different plants. So for like brassicas, they'll probably stay inside for like 4 weeks before they go outside. For tomatoes and peppers, this could be about 8 weeks. And then alliums, which are like your garlic and your onions, that's about 6 to 8 weeks. And then before they go outside, you have to really prepare them for the elements out there, so you have to harden them off. So you don't want to shock them when they're going outside after they've been pampered in the greenhouse or in your house for however many weeks. So you do this by just setting them outside for the day. So during the day, you just move them outside, let them experience the temperature change and the wind, and then bring them in at night. You want to do that for up to a week if you can, if that's possible with your schedule. And just some tips for doing that. Still maintain them, still check to make sure that you're watering them, that their temperature is still okay, and that they're just doing well. And that's it. And again, all weather contingent, so keep an eye on them, but hopefully your plants will be ready and they'll be great.
I'm going to pull up the chat, and then the director of market farming here at Allegheny Mountain Institute, Pat Banks, will be helping me answer some questions.
Got funky hair going on. My hat back on.
Awesome. So I don't know if you can see the chat, Pat, but I can't certainly read them out.
Cool. Yeah, I can't see it.
Okay. Someone says, hi, Pat. Someone also said they missed the ideal temperatures. The range I gave for soil temperature was about 68 to 85 and that can depend. Do you have anything else to add to that, Pat?
Yeah, so I guess a good rule of thumb when to think about soil temperature, and it's a good rule of thumb in general for all things planting. The cooler stuff's gonna love a cooler temperature, so in that range, 68 to 85. 68. That's what we do our spinach, our lettuce. Stuff like the colder weather stuff in your spring and fall, and then we get into your tomatoes and peppers and eggplant and summer squash and winter squash and stuff that loves the heat. That's going to be around 80, 85. Each one of those specific crops are going to have specific temperatures because like for instance, I know that tomatoes like 78 degrees is what they prefer due to just research and prior my experience. But if you look for temperature on a specific crop, that'll definitely be online. But a general range, hotter weather like crops like peppers, tomatoes are going to like hotter soil temperature. Cooler weather stuff's going to like cooler. So.
Awesome. Someone else asked, what are the signs of overwatering a seedling?
That's good. Something that's always a constant struggle. As difficult as a farmer, as any grower is watering, both in your greenhouse and in the field. But in your field, it's good to once your transplants pop up and they got their, so when they first sprout, it's going to be what's called the cotyledons, the first leaves you see. So those are your first. You don't want to you want to err on the side of water then, but once your first true leaves come up, so that's the leaves after your cotyledons, then it's okay for your plant to dry out a bit. So feel that soil. It's healthy for that plant to start. Get a little distressed because if out here there's gonna be times where there's distress for the plants to there's gonna be times of drought and times of overwatering. But to tell you're gonna form on ours it forms a green kind of algae on the top, and I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head, but that's a good indicator. Also, if you see your seed pop up and it kind of just falls over, that's called dampening off, and that's a sign of overwatering too. A good rule of thumb for me right now is we water once a day in our greenhouse, and when you water all the way through. So you want to see your tray or your pot leak at the bottom. That'll help with consistent watering as well. So don't add, make sure you just water the entire pot, not just a little bit.
Thanks, Pat. Then someone asked, do we follow a different schedule for our farm on the mountain versus here at Augusta Health?
Most definitely. It's a lot. We're, in terms of growing zones, we're a zone ahead of our farm that's just an hour and a half away in the mountains. It's a different climate up there. We have a lot less harsh spring down here than it would be up there. So we're able to get earlier stuff in often, and as long as growing with, certain things grow it, and they can grow, for instance, on our mountain farm, they can grow brassicas all year long, where we have a short window, but we grow tomatoes and sweet potatoes and winter squash and all that stuff really well because it's a lot warmer down here. So we generally grow the same things, but they're drastically different in how much we can grow of each quantity. So I don't know if that quite answered the question, but.
And someone else asked if there's a list of varieties that do well in the valley. They have not had luck with tomatoes in the past.
Sure. For tomatoes specifically, it's what I would recommend when you get a disease on your tomatoes, and what I try to do is really identify that disease, and that's going to help you for the following year. There's a lot of depending on what your values and viewpoints are, there's a lot of hybrid tomatoes out there that they breed to let's say leaf mold is one, or early blight or late blight. Those are a few diseases that pop up. They make those varieties that are resistant or semi-resistant to those. In terms of specific ones that we use, we grow tomatoes. We struggle with outdoor tomatoes, and especially this last year has been hard because just with the way when the diseases sprout from those tomatoes is when it rains and soil, it's humid, it rains, soil splashes up on those leaves, and that's where all the disease kind of spurts from. We grow all of our tomatoes inside of a tunnel. It's not a greenhouse, but inside high tunnels and caterpillar tunnels. So we essentially control the rain, and we avoid all that because of the disease. But I would say like Big Beef is a good one. Celebrity is a good determinate and indeterminate tomatoes, which are like vary in terms of growing techniques. And then heirloom tomatoes typically get disease no matter what, so I would grow any kind of Cherokee purple, Cherokee green, striped German. Those are all good varieties. I don't know if you can see my chat or not, but I can type those in too. But yeah, so that's a long-winded answer.
Someone mentioned, which I'm glad they caught this, that tap water, we need to be careful not to use tap water on the plants if it's city water. Sometimes I forget after living on the mountain farm in Highland County with that beautiful spring water that you have to be careful with city water and the chemicals in it. So thank you for mentioning that. Let's see. Someone else asked what temperature for the water, because all I said was just not cold. So I guess more specifically.
I'm not sure the specific temperature of the water, but we just started our first round of tomatoes here that we'll be growing in our greenhouse, and we're gonna start holding just water overnight in cans for the time being. I wouldn't say you want like scalding boiling water. I would say just warm to the touch is gonna be good.
Okay. And if your seeds are not sprouting, are there techniques or further steps to help it grow?
Depends on, if your soil temperature is right, and you're holding the right moisture. Those are the first questions I ask when a seed doesn't sprout is, what were my temperatures at? Because that's really what is going to drive it. But after that, I started asking how old the seed was. So if you have older seeds, it's gonna, if you have 2 or 3 year old seeds, I would recommend planting multiple per cell, just so that you have guaranteed the older the seed gets, the less likely it's going to germinate. So if you see a 98% germination for this year on your seed packet, that's going to drastically drop year after year, unless it's held in the extreme right conditions, at 40, 50 degrees, or I'm not quite sure on this. We don't hold them that great. So, but in terms of if it doesn't germinate, I'd give it a week, but then you might want to try replanting. And it doesn't hurt to dig around in there too. If you want to check out your seed, just kind of scrape off until you find it. And if you see that it's, got root, it started rooting, then you're well on your way. But if it's not, and you pick it up and you kind of squeeze it and it's just mushes, if it just mushes, then it's a rotten seed. So.
And I think you may have just answered this as well, but how many seeds for each cell, which I think you just mentioned.
Yeah, that depends on what you're growing. And it depends on the germination rate of, your seed. Most seed packets will have a germination rate of and whatever, 60 to 90% or 100%. I would say if it's below 90, I would put 2 in. Just because for me personally out here, it's way easier to pick one out of the cell than it is to go back through and fill in. And then it depends on what you're growing in terms of we multi-seed dill and cilantro. We put 5 or 6 per cell in there. And we plant that out because when that grows together, the way we do bunches on our farm is we plant them out in row. And each spot where we plant those bunches, when we transplant, is going to be a bunch for we sell or we give to our patients. So it all depends on what you're growing.
No new questions have come in. Someone did ask about methods for pest control in the valley. I'm not sure at what stage, I guess just in the seedling stage.
Yeah, I guess like in terms of the seedling stage, we haven't struggled a whole lot with our enclosed greenhouse yet. We had an aphid problem last year that we used an array of things. I would recommend though with aphids, specifically on tomatoes and peppers, just probably hitting it with some insecticidal soap and then using a garlic like barrier after that once a week. Once I've learned that, once you see them in the greenhouse, it's pretty hard to get them off. I really believe in beneficial insects and using them as much as we can. But if they're in your greenhouse, it's hard to keep a beneficial insect. At least in ours, it's more of it's not as enticing for insects because it's got crush and run and just kind of not like super eco-friendly, not eco-friendly, but plant-friendly.
Awesome. Another question about pests. Someone has been having issues with their eggplants. Do you have any suggestion?
I'm assuming it's been eaten by everything, every bug out there. So the way we plant eggplant is we just dip it in having it, again, kind of wrapping it back to seed starting. I really believe in the stronger your plants can be before you put them out, the stronger they're going to perform in the field. If you don't hesitate, if you have like a bunch of broccoli, like say you have 7 or 8 plants of broccoli and you only want, 5 or 6, if you have a few ones that don't look good, they're probably not going to grow good when you plant them in your garden. So having really, really beneficial, like really strong plants to begin with is going to really go a long way, especially with pest control. And just a quick note on eggplant, not getting too into it, is we use a kaolin clay, which is the clay that it's a barrier that you dip your plant in. It's actually used a lot in toothbrush, in your toothpaste, but you dip it in, it creates a shield, and then it still photosynthesizes, but keeps pests off. Then we cover them with row cover immediately. So that's how we do eggplant.
Another question. Is there any good way to control fungus, gnats, while trying to start seeds indoors?
We had a gnat problem last year. I tried sticky traps, like yellow sticky traps. The gnats seem to be attracted to. It wasn't too bad. It wasn't like crazy bad. It's just more of annoying. We also had like a fly, like a trap, just a trap for them, like apple cider vinegar traps, much like you would do like with fruit flies. In terms of fungus, I'm not quite sure on what you mean by fungus. Like, clarify, if you could clarify, that could help.
Okay. No more new questions have come in. I also do want to note that the germination chamber that we have, Dylan actually did kind of put that together himself, but we used Ben Hartman's from Lean Farms schematics for that. Yeah. So if you have any more questions about germination chambers, I would refer to that. He has a book.
Yeah, if you're looking to do something on that scale, like, for us, it makes sense to if we were to do that again, I'd be interested in trying just hooking up a crock pot to that thermostat and turning it on high, and what that difference would be between the heating element that we use. And if you're, I know this is a larger scale doing it, but at your home, like buying a heating mat hooked up to a thermostat, and putting that literally anywhere in your house covered with a piece of like plastic is gonna like really control your temperature too. So just make sure you water it in. If you have a heating mat and a piece of like, like your potting mix bag, put that over your seeds and set your temperature, and it'll do the same job. Or you can do that even in the sun too. Like if you didn't have a heating mat, just have a warm sunny spot and just have that sitting there. So
someone's asking, can you explain garlic barrier?
Yeah, it's a product sold by I wonder if I can. I'm gonna say hi. Like, how do I can't talk to you guys. That's only to you.
Yeah, that's something I can do.
Arbico is the pest control company I use, and it's just essentially it's a really really that's pressed like concentrated garlic mix that is used. It's what it does is there's a lot of insects that don't like, most things don't like alliums, including insects. That's my favorite thing to grow for that reason. So you have, for two things, if you have those throughout your garden, it's always good to have allium spread out because it's just good insect barrier. But on plants, it is said to fend away aphids and flies and stuff like that. So the jury's still out on that one.
So we'll give it a few seconds to see if anyone else has any more questions. I'll also be sending out a follow-up email, so if you have any more specific questions, feel free to reply to that email or reply. My email will be in there.
Yeah, and just a note on when you transplant your stuff this spring, it's good to get excited. We get really excited out here too, but think about how warm that temperature is that you're planting into before you plant your transplants out there, because it can be if it's not warm, it's going to set you back a bit and they're going to expose your plant to a lot of probably unnecessary damage. So either think of ways, like we use a lot of landscape fabric to heat up our soils. So yeah, just a tip before you get out there. I'm really hoping that sometime soon for all of us.
Someone else did ask, how do you decide which plant to thin when there's multiple plants germinated in the cell?
And the strongest one for sure. If there's one that has any slight deficiency in it, I would take it out. Or the one that's most convenient, and not going to disturb the other ones. But ultimately just trying to get one in there with certain crops.
Awesome. Well, I think that brings us to the end. Again, this will all be put up on Allegheny Mountain Institute's YouTube channel, so you can find it there. I'll be sending a link to that in that follow-up email. Also, please check our website for any future events, future workshops. Also, you can make donations there. You can check out our Farm and Food System Fellowship. We've changed the names a few times. That deadline's coming up on March 10th. So if anyone's interested or know anyone who could be interested, please tell them to check it out. And we'll hope to see you guys at more things. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everybody.